morning. I'm Peggy Anne Montgomery from flowerbulbs.com, and we're thrilled to have you here today with Garden Gate Magazine in our yard, our front lawn here in Delaware. And this is my husband, fellow horticulturist Dan Benarcik.
Hi there, I'm a horticulturist with Chanticleer Foundation. We're a public garden west of Philadelphia, and we're going to plant a bulb lawn this morning.
Bulb lawns have been around for a long time. This is not something we thought up. They've been using them in European gardens for hundreds of years. You'll see them at a lot of botanic gardens around our country. And today we're going to plant one because we want to show you how you can make your lawn wildlife friendly.
What if we could plant a garden that gets better with every year, provides an early nectary source for pollinators, and is virtually free of weeding?
I think that sounds great. I'm into low maintenance, man.
It sounds like a bulb lawn to me.
Yeah.
And we're out here in the front yard where we have an area that we don't use very often, not a high traffic area. It has a gentle slope so that it's going to drain and water's not going to accumulate, and it gets great sun early in the spring, full sun.
Yeah.
And the bulbs really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's really just another way to plant for naturalizing, and that means planting bulbs that are going to come back every single year and that are actually going to multiply fairly easily. And this is really exciting because when the pollinators first emerge, the first honeybees and the first bumblebees, there is very, very little in bloom, and they need to forage as quickly as they can. And this is a way to do it. It's always a good idea to try to choose the bulbs you're going to use that are single flowers so they can get to the nectaries easily. Use the gorgeous doubles for food for your soul in other parts of the garden, but that is a great space for this. And you will see the pollinators out on this really early. Sometimes you'll even see them curled up and sleep in a little crocus when they close up at night.
Another reason we chose this palette of bulbs is these are also good perennializing bulbs. That means they come back every year, and as a bonus, they seed in and they multiply. So every year, this bulb lawn is going to get better and better.
Yeah, so I think one question people always ask about this is, when can I mow my lawn again? Now you can see we just mowed everything on the lowest setting of our lawnmower, so it's easy to drill in the bulbs because we're going to use power planters. There's no easier way to plant bulbs than with a bulb auger. I wouldn't even try it without. And then this spring, what's going to happen is they're going to start to bloom very early. They're going to be up even before the grass starts growing. Try to wait as long as you can until the foliage turns yellow, and then you can just mow this area like you do the rest of the lawn. It's really that simple.
And for most of the summer, it's going to give the appearance of a general lawn, while those bulbs are down below in a dormant state, waiting to produce next spring.
Mm-hmm. Well, last night, Dan and I came out and we laid out a hose to kind of define where the bed is going to be. Spray paint would be, a good idea too. Both are cheap and easy, and it'll just kind of mark the path. And make sure that you leave, a section here so that if you do have to do any maintenance on the border where the bulbs are blooming, you can still get in.
I like to lay out the hose to define the bed just so I can visualize the project that we have at hand. And like Peggy mentions, this little access path around here, it's important because come springtime when these bulbs are blooming, I want to come out and enjoy them, but I don't want to have to step on them to do that.
Yeah.
So we should probably talk about the bulbs that we're going to plant.
Yeah,
right?
Let's talk about bulbs next. So you'll often hear that you should plant bulbs 3 times as deep as they are big. So for instance, Dan's going to show you our daffodils are about 2 inches tall, so you want to plant those 6 inches deep. We're going to be planting at 3 different heights. Dan's going to show you the bulbs.
So Peggy mentioned the daffodils. They're about 2 inches tall, so we're going to dig a hole about 6 inches deep so that they can reside in there about 1/3 of the way down the hole. That's an example of a large bulb. We have a whole group of sort of intermediate sized bulbs, and we're going to plant them at about 3 inches deep so that they can reside low in that hole. And then lastly, we're going to be using some really quite small bulbs, tiny little things in fact, that we're only going to put them in a hole about 2 inches deep, maybe even 1.5 inches. But basically we want to tuck those in so the squirrels don't get to them.
Right. And the reason I have kept those out of the mix is because they're so tiny they would just filter down to the bottom of the basket. So whenever Dan digs a small hole, I'm just going to throw a couple in, and I'll probably put a couple of bulbs in each hole. So I think it's always important to stop and think about safety. These are great tools. They're going to make your job really easy, but it's always important to focus on safety, and Dan's going to give us a little safety demonstration.
Peggy's absolutely right. In order for this project to be successful, we want to be safe as well. Nobody wants to get hurt because then all the fun is out of the project. So I just want to go over the basics of a cordless drill, and that's what's going to drive our power augers today. Most of the drills come in different colors, different brands, but fundamentally they're similar. They have a trigger that controls the speed. They have a directional control, which controls whether it screws in or screws out, or drills in or drills out. There's a speed control on the top, which goes very fast, but basically we want it to go very slow for control. And then lastly, there's a clutch, and that's generally a numerical or an alphanumeric collar that rotates around the body of the drill. And what we want to do is try to find an icon that's shaped like a drill, and what that means, that's a direct drive. That puts all the power and the torque of this drill into the ground. So that's all well and good, but these drills are really powerful these days. So one of the things I like to do when I'm drilling with a long auger like this is to square up with it. One hand on the trigger, a second hand on the body of the drill, and I put it so it's right up against my leg, so that if I'm drilling and it binds, it hits my leg, okay? It doesn't twist my wrist, because that will really set you up for some problems. These longer augers, they may seem a little bit more cumbersome, but if you're planting for a while, I get to work in a more upright position than crouched down. Some people prefer a smaller auger.
Yeah, you know, these are really nice. If I'm working alone and I'm on my kneeler and I'm on my hands and knees, this is a great size for me. I can control it easily. I can put my whole weight on it with my free hand. Those are wonderful, but we've learned when we're working together to work smarter, not harder, and use a really long auger.
So keep it safe and keep it successful.
So you're probably thinking, this is going to ruin my lawn. Well, luckily, grass being grass, it won't. The grass will grow back very quickly. But honestly, this kind of planting is really more for the nature lover. This isn't for somebody with a manicured lawn that uses pre-emergence or has irrigation systems. You know, we don't think that our turf has an awful lot of value to wildlife, but by doing this, bringing in food for pollinators, we're making our lawn functional for nature. And that's what we really want. And honestly, you can't stop grass if you tried. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit of organic bulb fertilizer. Now, would these bulbs grow without it? Yeah, probably. But if I'm going to put in this kind of, you know, investment in my time and in the bulbs, I want to make sure they're going to be okay. So I'm just going to take a little bit, maybe like a teaspoon, maybe even less for a hole, and put it at the bottom of the planting hole, because that way the phosphorus in here will become available to the bulbs. The bulbs aren't just going to sit here all winter. They're going to start putting on roots now. So this is just a little bit extra special to make sure that they're really happy and are going to thrive here.
Peggy makes a really good point. We're planting now in October. October and November are great times to plant bulbs because the bulbs are still actively growing. The soils have not gotten cold yet, and the bulbs will very quickly throw roots in to establish themselves. And by the same token, you mentioned turf. Turf is more accurate or more happy to recover at this time of year. So as she mentioned, it's going to heal itself relatively quickly. Now, one of the things that we're doing here in our bulb lawn is we've laid out the hose and we're starting to plant within the bed that we've already defined. We're just using that hose as a guideline, but we, because of our sloping hill, are starting at the top of the hill. I mentioned earlier that the bulbs are going to begin to seed in when they're successful, and the seed, simply by gravity, moves downhill. So that's why we're going heavy on the top. And as we get toward the end of our bulb inventory, it'll be a little bit lighter on the downhill side, knowing that they'll succeed and seed in down there.
Now I'm putting in our daffodil bulbs. This is tete-a-tete. It's a pretty good sized bulb, so I'm just putting in one per hole. But with some of these smaller ones, like this Tulipa sylvestris, I'm going to put 2 in each hole. That way we have to dig half as many, and it'll be a little bulkier and a better show in the spring.
And notice that Peggy is not being terribly specific about the numbers or the different varieties of the smaller bulbs in the holes. And some of you may say, well, you're putting 3 different bulbs in the same hole. That's going to be a problem. The nice thing about this mix is each one of these species blooms at a different time. What that's going to do is give you a very extended bloom time, because only 1, 2, or maybe at the most 3 of them are going to be blooming at the same time. So there's very little competition, but it maximizes the display and the duration of the display as well.
So one of the biggest questions we get at flowerbulbs.com is, what about the rodents? What about the squirrels, the voles, the deer, everybody that is going to come in here and eat your bulbs? Well, good news. This mixture of bulbs are really things that they don't like to eat. So you're pretty safe there, except for tulips and crocus. But because they're mixed with so many bulbs like narcissus and all the rest that they don't like, they'll generally leave them alone. There is a chance that the squirrels are going to get in here and dig, only because squirrels love freshly disturbed soil. So there's a couple things you can do. Some people lay down chicken wire and just peg it down for the first few weeks or through the winter, and that keeps the animals out. You can also buy organic stuff to just put over the top, and it's mostly just castor oil, and that will keep them out. That's another thing to do. We're lucky we don't really have any deer pressure here, but all of these bulbs, except for maybe some crocus and the botanic tulips, deer don't eat. And again, when they're mixed in, it's really unlikely that they're going to go through the whole thing and then find that one tulip and eat it. So you're going to be pretty safe there. And those are big questions, and it's really important. But we've got about a
Peg,
third.
I want to jump in there for just a moment. You made a really good point about the squirrels and the loose soil, that they enjoy digging in loose soil. So as soon as we're finished drilling and fertilizing and planting the bulbs in here, I think I'm going to go down to the hardware store and pick up a small bag of grass seed. Just a top dress, since the soil is loose. Rake that over the top. It's just going to speed up healing of the lawn, and frankly, it's my opportunity to make our lawn look a little bit better too. But then we're going to turn a sprinkler on this. That's going to get the grass seed watered in. It's going to get the soil watered in around the bulbs, and then that soil is no longer loose for the squirrels to get into. And they'll be that much more, dissuaded from digging.
Right. And another thing too is planting the bulbs a little deeper means they're really not going to dig that far down to go ahead and get those bulbs. And it's fine for the bulbs. They're going to make their way up. And another question we always get is, what if I don't know which is the pointy end? It really just doesn't matter, because bulbs know which way is up. Everything's going to be fine. This is pretty easy stuff. So now we got these bulbs in. We're going to plant a few more after this, but let's talk about next spring.
Next spring, love it. What are we going to do next spring?
Next spring is going to start early for us, because these are what they call very early spring bulbs. And you'll see this in catalogs and online. They'll be very early spring, early summer. And that's because they can't say a month, because our country's so big, things happen at different times. But probably in about February, these bulbs are going to start coming up, and they're going to bloom in succession over many, many weeks. So I promise that I'm going to take pictures every week for you this spring as they come up and shine. They're going to delight our neighbors. They're going to get us outside early, enjoying the garden. And, that's really what it's all about. We're going to feed the pollinators. We're going to feed our souls. And life is good.
Life is good. And I want to mention one other thing about spring. And spring is the time that many people put down weed prevention on their lawns. We mentioned this earlier on, but we want to reinforce that pre-emergent herbicides, that is herbicides that are applied to the lawns to keep weeds suppressed, are going to work against your bulbs. Now, I want to qualify that. A lot of people also put down crabgrass pre-emergent. Now, crabgrass pre-emergent has no effect on the bulbs. So you can use a crabgrass pre-emergent because it's specific only to the crabgrass. But any of the general broadleaf herbicides, pre-emergents, that's where we get into trouble with the bulbs.
Right. You know, this is a style and a way to plant really for people that love nature and love wildlife. And this isn't for manicured lawns and irrigation systems. This is really about bringing beauty to your garden, but also favoring the wildlife and also using your lawn that is pretty sterile as a way to encourage more insects, which encourages more birds, and that just makes us happy.
So I think we've got a few more bulbs to screw in.
Yeah.
And get the ground graded out.
Oh, and I just wanted to say thank you, though. I want to say thank you for Garden Gate Magazine for coming out. This is really special, and we're really, really, really thankful that you came out to help us today to spread this word. Again, I wanted to talk to you about flowerbulbs.com. You're not going to buy anything at our website. There's nothing there to buy. We want to inspire you and educate you about bulbs. Find us on social media, ask questions, because I'll be the one answering. And again, we cannot thank Garden Gate enough for coming out, helping us talk about this fun weekend project. Really, this whole thing is only going to take, we're going to put in 1,000 bulbs. We'll be done by lunchtime. You can do this. We're old, we can do it. You can do it too.
You can do it too. We always enjoy sharing our garden with you, our friends at Garden Gate Magazine, and basically anybody that's interested in gardening, we're interested in them. So thank you very much.